Okay. Hi, guys. So, welcome to an episode of Is That So? And today, surprisingly, on this very fun weekend, I have a topic for both of you that I really want to know about. It's something I think we've all lived at some point. We've all been employees of companies, and I was watching someone's page the other day, and it hit me that lately I've been seeing a lot of Instagram content, YouTube content, day in my life as an ex company's employee. And there's this new trend sort of that has started coming, which is employee marketing. Like that's what they are calling it, or the employee megaphone, so to say, where a lot of companies today, instead of, there was a time when you used to use brand ambassadors, and then customer advocacy sort of came about, and now everybody wants to be talking about their employees. So what I want to maybe start and set the group with is like, have you heard of this phenomena or encountered it? Do you think this is something that holds marketing value for companies? And if so, what is it that employers out there could be doing to actually market themselves better to the audience? And fourth, which is like a bonus question, do you think besides the employee angle, there's something that, there's power in you getting built as a brand if an employee speaks about a company that like really makes you think, this company is like, yeah, this is the brand I want to shop from or use the services of. So,
Interesting. So you're talking at it. Are you talking at it? I mean, like you're talking at it from both an internal and external perspective. So that's one observation I've got. Um, I'm also curious to kind of think about where, when this started, or is this a new thing, or was this always there and now we're beginning to recognize it? So that's the second thing that I'm thinking of. The third, what I'm wondering is, are employees actually the best brand ambassadors that we can have? Because sometimes they might be really really upset with things. So I don't know. The fourth thing is, it also depends upon which stage your organization is in. The life cycle of the organization. Many thoughts, man. But Swapnil, what do you think?
No, the first thing that I think is you people have too many questions. I have one very simple question, and maybe I'll straight away ask Krishni this. I'm saying, Krishni, when you say employee marketing, are you talking about them marketing their organization? So it's employee marketing the employer, or is it the employee marketing the product, or is it both?
I think it's employee marketing the organization
Hmm.
or the
Hmm.
company per se. But I do want us to answer that fourth question ki if they do this, does it really empower it as a brand and कि यार इसके
Yeah.
products भी बहुत सही होंगे to use types. Yeah.
So, so Sid, if that was the question, no, then I think one of the questions that you've asked is that fundamentally this is not new,
Hmm.
right? Employee marketing has always been used in different shape and forms. The simplest form of this has been employee what do you say, reward for referral rewards, right? So you refer a person who joins your organization, and you basically take home a little amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And referral was always used because fundamentally the premise that was there was that if the employee is happy, that employee would want. So if you're happy with the pond, you'll ask other buffaloes to also swim in the same pond. Um, so I don't think the concept is new, but I am absolutely sure that it's gained a lot of relevance in the recent past because of a few reasons. I think the first and the foremost reason is the fact that the attitude that the workforce today has towards their jobs has changed,
Hmm.
right? Go back a few years, and uh, and and I'm saying it's before people start thinking that this is Gen Z and they're not serious about work. That's not the point. They're very serious about their work, but I think the way they look at job, the way they look at learning, and the way they look at money is very different from how, for example, you and I used to look at it.
Hmm.
For us, money was a means to an end. For them, money is something that helps them do whatever they want to do. So
Yeah.
our job was to make ends meet. Their job is to say this money has to help me do a lot of other things. And honestly, I think the present generation looks at work and learning also from the same point of view. they look at it as a source of what should I say, continuous learning and improvement. Once they feel they know something about, let's say, a topic, then they're just too curious and interested in learning something new, which has also translated into them being very happy shifting jobs. So because we were looking at money as a means to make ends meet, because we were looking at money as a basic necessity that ensured that things worked, we were almost in that state of inertia to say, why should I leave this job and why should I do something else?
So let me just add to it a little,
Yeah.
so that, sorry to interrupt you, but what I thought was really useful is, see, tali do haath se bajti hai. So it's not just the Gen Zers who are changing, but I think that there is a fundamental change in one place, which is not only how Gen Zers are looking at their jobs, but also how organizations are updating their knowledge about brand building and marketing. and
Yeah.
and I think that somewhere the old school style of marketing was working in an area when there was information asymmetry between various parties. And if I look at the thing that is staring us in the face, is there is information symmetry. Employees are going to look at the way in which organizations are differently, but organizations want to use the employees to market them in a way that other stakeholders can't, because there's a certain level of genuineness.
You're very
Exactly.
right,
I
and I'm
was
saying
just about
I was
to say.
coming to the same point. So I said one is their attitude. I think the second point, and I don't know where I've heard this word asymmetry somewhere else, uh, but I think the important point is that now, one, because the employee is also very clear on what they expect from the organization, they're very happy to make those choices, which basically almost forces organizations to ensure that they are always putting their best foot forward. In today's day and age, because of that reducing asymmetry of information, the ability for the employee to come to know about the organization, and this is both through formal and informal channels, is just significantly, it's of a different order of magnitude. And that is where then happy and satisfied, it's like equivalent of a product review on Amazon, or an NPS score for a survey,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's what people are making their decision on. It's basically a lot of data points for people to make that decision, right? Because now they don't want to enter this pool to say, hey, 6 months later I'm looking for a job because sadly I made a decision and it doesn't work for me. So people want to go in and say, even if I'm going there for, let's say, okay, no one's planning to stay 20 years in an organization. They might be planning to go and stay there for 2 to 3 years, but they don't want to compromise on what is important to them. So they want to go to an organization where they will feel comfortable doing whatever they want to do. And with the information, like you are absolutely correctly pointing out, it makes even more important the role of a person who's within the system to come and talk about it.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, right? So if you have, sorry, Krishna, you want to speak? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to add to this. I feel there is some sense, like some lens that Gen Z is sort of the driving force of, because I feel when millennials sort of came to the workforce, it was like somewhere the information asymmetry was getting solved for internet access, all of this came about. But I think generally this generation is more inclined on like having a better conscience, more purposefulness of companies. And I think it's not just in the way the employer employee relationship is looked at, but the way products are also thought about. For example, I remember when I was in school, a kid, I was very happy to wear some Nike shoes to school, and this person said, Nike runs sweatshops. And I was young enough to not know what sweatshops even meant. And I was like, what are sweatshops? And I didn't have Google, so I asked a bunch of people. And I was like, oh, they do child labor. Oh, all of this shit happens, and they are employing people in all these spaces. And I think the millennials became aware of that information, but today Gen Z sort of makes more people act on it. And I think that's sort of the
Beautiful.
differentiation and why
I
Yeah,
think
it's
and
more
thank
important
you
today.
for bringing us back to earth. What
yeah,
I wanted to say was two or three things, right? One is that I see it, and we can have a discussion or a debate around it. One is that there is certainly a clash of value systems within almost all organizations. Gen X, the millennials, and Gen Z, right? So you have value systems which are based out of their context coming and into play. So it's quite likely that there will be clashes. Now, the question that comes to my mind is, how does an organization actually select the people who it will choose to actually speak for it? Or do they, or do organizations, I personally think if organizations want all employees to go and talk on their behalf, it is going to come a cropper. It is going to be a terrible thing. There has to be a strategy.
No,
Yeah.
that absolutely. I'm saying like any core marketing. So I think 2 or 3 points again. The first one is you're absolutely right that cultural clash, as you're calling out, is only natural because, as I said, the drivers of what got us to a company, what got us to that job, and what kept us in that job have changed.
Hmm.
Right? I'm saying the the story of how our parents, for example, retired from the company that they joined. Everyone knows about it today. No one even looks at saying, hey, will I make superannuation, which is 5 years. So I'm saying that's how life is changing, and those so to speak forks in the road and
Yeah.
crossroads are true for every organization. By the time the Gen Zers kind of come and sit at the top, who knows 10 years down the line how work culture would have adapted into a very different beast altogether.
But I think how
uh,
they would
but
want to choose
but
such
having
people.
sorry, just
Yeah.
I couldn't hear you, Krishna. You got stuck.
Oh, I was just saying, how do you think people like employers would choose such people?
Hmm. No, so I was coming to that only, saying it's very critical that they look at it as a quintessential branding and marketing exercise. They will have to look at what are the qualities of the organization that I want to build, who my
Yeah.
Yeah.
audience is, right? And therefore who will be the best person to work to kind of appeal to those people. The
Yeah.
CEO of the organization can be very, very inspiring to, let's say, B school graduates, but the CEO of the organization talking to people who spent 2 3 years will possibly lead to saying, okay, if the CEO has to come and pitch the organization, there is something wrong, right?
Yeah.
Because the level of because so the right, so to speak, it's the quintessential target of seeing who am I as a brand, who's my consumer, and what binds them, as in what is their
Yeah.
context, brings out who should therefore be the face of what is being talked of. There are organizations where, for example, the leaders of the organization are very popular, but people would not want to go and work in that organization because they also have people who've been through that and say, sorry, yaar, but that's not, as I said, that's not the pond you would want to swim in, because the person's persona on screen is very different from how they work. And I'm saying if that doesn't work for you, then that's not the place that we're talking about. So there are elements of culture, there are elements of the employer's personality, there are elements of overall work life balance which matter to people, and to that extent they will always need to find who will work best for who we are talking to, and it will be different for different sets of people.
Can we
Yeah.
let's make an example out of this, okay? I am finding so many analogies, by the way, to an everyday home situation from this because I think I've lived in a joint setup for quite some time. So I've had my grandparents, my parents, and myself living in the same roof. And I've seen that metamorphosis sort of happen where it was like while I was like under the age of 10, it was everything like, okay, how has my grandfather sort of done things, and we would do that a certain way. And then when I was hitting my teens, it was like I think my parents sort of started taking decisions, but it was more towards, hey, what does the young generation think at school? And it comes out in everyday examples, right? Ki dinner kahan karne jana hai? Traditionally, it would be some North Indian place, and then it would go towards fine dining because the parents would want to go there. But as the kids started going up, it was like, okay, we want to eat somewhere out. So same thing, if I were to put in organizations today, which is like the point that Sid brought up earlier, which is there's Gen X sitting, which is probably the core values of the brand that exist. Because purani company hai, like some Gen X guy has probably built it. Middle management to senior management, में बड़े millennials आ गए हैं. But end of the day, they want to appeal to Gen Z because that's the force and customers they want to acquire in the future. So how does one go about like
Not
doing
just
it?
that,
Because
Rashmi, yeah, not just that, but I was just thinking while you were speaking and while Swapnil was also addressing this. I don't know whether we have the ability to understand which part of the value system it should be connected to for each generation, right?
yeah,
So, like for example, it also depends upon your organization. Like you were talking Nike and sweatshops. Now, sweatshops might make a Gen Zer sweat, okay, or a millennial. I think a millennial will sweat because a millennial is deeply connected to, and I'm just trying to make it as practical as possible. So, a millennial will probably get really upset if there's a sweatshop going because a millennial was born in a time of peace and he wants good and experiences and all of that. Yeah, so that's one. But Gen Zers would probably be more introspective, saying, "Hey, you know what? I don't know whether these are good living conditions, and are we really putting our Western values on them and all of that." So they'll have a more balanced perspective. Gen Xers will say, "यार उनको in a
hard
very
work.
ट्रांजैक्शनल वे कि यार उनको पैसा मिल रहा है ना, अच्छा मिल रहा है, क्या है, ऑल ऑफ दैट हमको भी मिल रहा है, चलो यार, लेट्स मूव ऑन." नाउ I'm just saying that, okay, so you really need to understand who the hell your brand ambassador is from an internal perspective,
No,
right?
I'm saying
Yeah,
the point that you just said, Sid. I'm saying that doesn't work for anyone. I'm saying we are very happy ordering on quick commerce and, and getting everything delivered in 10 minutes. But that's a separate topic. Actually, what Krishni was speaking brings out another very interesting topic, which is the fact that this crossroads that we were talking about. How does an organization, even internally, keep its personality? There's a Gen
yeah,
Xer who looks at this organization in one way. There's a Gen
Yeah.
Zer who looks at this organization in a very different way. And they are sitting, and I'm saying, see, culture, as someone said, culture is not what is culture is fundamentally what is accepted in the organization. So the people sitting at the bottom will learn from people sitting at the top, right? Culture
yeah,
always flows top down; it never gets built bottom up. So in such a scenario, when there is a perennial crossroad, because now generations also kind of shift very fast. It's not like 30 years the same generation, etc., etc.
yeah.
In such a scenario, how do you ensure that that remains? Because I'm saying what the Gen Zer sees today in the organization, for them, that's what the organization is.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So what was the legacy of the past doesn't hold true anymore,
No.
true, very
right?
true.
So a person who spent 15 years in the organization will tell you great stories of what is happening, but a person who spent 6 months will say, "Hey, that's all legacy of the past, यार. वो
Yeah,
भारत
man.
भी एक टाइम पे सोने की चिड़िया होता था." But the operating term is होता था, not है.
Correct.
Yeah.
So forget about going out. First, how do you ensure that people who come in, they kind of understand what the organization is all about, and
Understood.
do people live that?
Yeah.
See, because for a person who's going out and talking about the organization, they need to see that happening. I'm saying I was very deeply involved with campus recruitment, with multiple organizations that I've been with, right? But I could talk very easily about them because whatever I talked of, I knew I was speaking the truth. I was not peddling what I was asked to talk about, right? I was speaking because I saw that happen on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Therefore, it was a lot easier. I was not under oath, but I was not speaking, I was not giving out any
Yeah,
lies. I was speaking the truth.
Hmm.
But if that was a situation where the organization kind of did not fulfill, or did not live, as they say, did not walk the talk, I would not have been able to do that.
Yeah.
but let's do it. I think there's no straight jacket answer to some of this. Let's do a gut feel.
Huh.
Which generation's way, if we had to put our bets on or put our money on, which generation's choices or values would matter most as like the organization cultures evolve, I guess. Like where
So
do you guys have your money
yeah,
on?
no. So when Elon Musk is at the table, and there are a lot of his junior Gen X, Gen Zers who are with him, they laugh at his dumb jokes,
Yeah.
right? So the reason why they laugh at his dumb jokes is because of what Swapnil was talking about. Power flows like culture top down, right?
Yep.
So it's quite difficult for Gen Zers to express themselves in the culture, but they are going to carry that resentment passive aggressively
Yeah, yeah.
and go out and
क्योंकि
express.
सास की कभी बहू थी.
हाँ, क्योंकि साथ
Very
बहुत
true. Actually,
absolutely.
very true. But do you think, like, I mean, if we were to dissect companies, like, I can see a bunch of companies that were started like 50, 60 years ago, like, a lot of these public private partnerships, and they will go through that metamorphosis, which is going to be like, Bagawat hogi ek din, or Gen X niklo yahan se, ab Gen Z ka raaj chalega type. And I'm also seeing a lot of companies that are like 10 or 15-year-olds, where at least I've seen the millennial founders have been very forthcoming about, okay, I guess Gen Z knows a thing or two better about life, and these are the paying consumers of the future. So it's important to go their way as well. So I feel like, depending on, I think there's a point to which you both brought earlier, that is power flows top down. I say which generation the power belongs to, the direction of decisions will swing that way a lot. Like, because
See,
you can see that in conversations, right? Like with this Narayan Murthy and I forget the other guy's name, the 70-hour work debate also that keeps
नहीं,
like
वो
90
keeps.
बेबी बूमर थे, वो बेबी बूमर थे, वो जेन एक्स वाले नहीं थे, बाय द वे.
वो Gen X से
हाँ.
भी उल्टे हैं. Yeah.
नहीं, हाँ. So
See,
first,
so
but
Krishni, I
Okay.
think. हाँ,
yeah,
sorry, you were saying something.
have
Sit,
you
sit.
answered? Have you answered? I do recognize that we are running out of time. So have you answered your question? Is there something that you would want us to make it
There
as
are
practical?
two questions that I want to
Yes.
make it practical, because you gave one. One was just product lives, like life cycle of the company come to
Mm,
play in some of
mm.
these decisions. And third thing is, how would, how can a, like, what could a company do to identify such voices? Like, of course, there's the classic triangle of brand, context, culture, that a customer that we've discussed. But like something very practical that a company could do, कि ये करोगे तो no brainer है.
Yeah, no, no,
These
absolutely. So I got a couple of thoughts, and I'll leave it to Swapnil to fill it, and then maybe he can give us a smart fact of the day or whatever to end it with a sweet dessert sort of thing, right? So here's two things from my side. One is I think that uh, if I look at the people who already have really strong voices on LinkedIn, I would look at them. Okay, I would look at them and I would try to understand what their value systems already are if I'm leading the organization. And I would make sure that I totally understand what they're trying to speak and the way in which I can co-opt them. So I would invite them in, and I would, yeah. So that is one thing I would do. The second thing I would do is Swapnil's point about brand personalities being schizophrenic is also very, very good. Internal, or rather, brand, yeah. So I think that what we need to do is figure out who the customer is over here, which is like externally focused. So and then say, okay, if the customer is Gen X, then we all need to have Gen X's value system as our North Star. If it is Gen Z, that's how it is. So those are the two things that I would say maybe I'll bring to the table.
See, so on one on one I agree, on the other I don't, and I'll tell you why. I think the
which one is
point on
which?
LinkedIn. No, I'll tell you. So I think the point on LinkedIn might not work so well,
Okay.
because a lot of the authenticity of a person comes from when they are talking about at a personal level,
Mm.
unless and until you own the company. So a Shantanu Deshpande talking
No,
about
wo chodo, हाँ.
Bombay Shaving Company is because, well, he's the company. Or
Yeah.
Bhavish talking about Ola and so on and so forth. That's otherwise people do not talk as employees. They talk as individuals, and to that extent they might have power in the system, unless and until they create content which becomes and looks and seems very organic. Paid content will be seen through, because I'm saying the reality also is that consumers are very smart.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
talking of paid content at all.
No,
I'm
no,
not
I'm
talking.
saying in the sense that this person has a lot of
It
equity on LinkedIn,
seems
so let this
paid.
person talk about the organization and that will work. I think that also, if it kind of sounds or feels very uh, antagonistic to what the person has been talking about at a personal level, there's clearly a mismatch that a lot of
I
people
wouldn't
will
want the same guy to talk on LinkedIn, Swapnil. I would want
Yeah.
to recruit him to
Oh, okay.
speak,
Acha. Okay,
because
okay,
he
okay.
already has a voice. He already
Which is
knows.
true. Okay. So
Yeah,
then I understood it
Like,
wrong. Then I
yeah.
understood it wrong. I think on the other, my thought is there are a couple of factors that kind of work for an organization. One is when you are putting your data out. I think one strong marker of NPS, so to speak, is the number of people who stay in the organization. So, how many people have, for example, spent X number of years in the organization? Yes, it does not take into consideration, for example, work conditions, because there is also data that said that 70% of Indians will work for a higher pay, even if it means significantly higher amount of stress. So, but I'm saying that's not the argument that we are playing for here. But I think if we can put across data saying, hey, these many number of managers, and not even, let's say, non-managerial staff, but I'm saying these number of people have stayed in the organization for X number of years, it kind of talks about the fact that there are systems and processes and an overall culture where people continue. Right. I would always like to believe that the best people to go and talk about an organization will be people sitting in the middle management, because I think they are sitting in roles which require continuous and deep transition. Because I'm saying it's the millennials who are talking on one hand to Gen Xers and baby boomers, and on the other hand to Gen Zers, and keeping everyone happy.
yeah,
So people who are in the middle of this whole, so to speak, churn are people who are best suited to tell what's happening in the organization, because they've seen a phase in the organization. If they can see it that it's getting better, or they can see it's getting worse, they've seen some cycles, if
Yeah.
if I'm to use that term, they can possibly be the best voice of the organization, because they'll have enough examples, they have enough relevant experience for them to come out as credible voices for the organization.
mm.
Understood. Understood. So, Krishni, have you got enough from the two of
Yeah, I
us?
think I've got
Yeah.
but I just had one call out. I think Swapnil, one thing I felt was जो आप बोल रहे थे, maybe I misunderstood the point, but it was like it's a great data point to show as employers कि इतने लोग stayed for such a long duration. Like I think it's an analysis of a metric, and a lot of times when you tell stories with just data, it doesn't quite have the sell. And I think
True.
that's where emotional angle sort of plays out stronger, which is like what is the voice really saying. Now this could depend on the audience, because I don't see a lot of uh, uh, Instagram posts about employees like day in life in this company, starting with अरे मैं इतने साल से यहाँ काम कर रहा हूँ. It's like मैं सुबह उठा,
No,
मुझे
no,
गूगल ने पैनकेक्स खिलाए ब्रेकफास्ट में, मेरा दिन बहुत अच्छा जा रहा है, अब मैं थक गया, मेरी मसाज हुई. So I think it's the subconscious aspects that really work, and I feel that's something that works for core marketing also. Like
Yeah.
washing
very
Nirma
valid.
song in the mind than like the actual product or utility is what stands out.
No, I totally agree with you. I'm saying, so I was saying, for example, number of people in the number of years is one of the metrics. It will
Yeah,
always need to be customized, right?
Wonderful.
I
Yeah.
remember, for example, I'm saying if there is an organization that's changing, if there was an
yeah,
organization that was sitting, let's say an old organization which was sitting and living as, let's say, a relic of the past, and now it's changing and it's becoming very modern. For them, the metric that they will put across will be saying 80% of our workforce now is people who've joined in the last 2 years,
Yeah.
and they're
yeah,
all young, and this is the age profile of the people who are coming in. So you're telling people that, hey, we are getting Gen Zers because we want to be a brand for the Gen Zers.
Yeah.
yep,
So it will
yeah,
have to be customized, right? An
correct.
organization which was in the past wants to continue. So a levers can talk, for example, a levers can talk about legacy and how many people have stayed in the organization. A Royal Enfield will talk about saying, hey, we were a one motorcycle brand for 50 years, but now in the last 10 years, we've expanded our workforce 3 times because my organization has grown 15, 20 times. This year, I just saw they've sold 10 lakh motorcycles.
सर
Wow.
And
जी,
in that,
मेरा मेरा अब अटेंशन स्पैन मोटरसाइकिल के यहाँ
खत्म
जा
हो
रहा
गया.
है. अब एक हाँ
आप
आप
मोटरसाइकिल से एक फैक्ट पे चलो,
हाँ
आपकी
फैक्ट
मोटरसाइकिल को फैक्ट चलाते हैं।
फैक्ट पे चलते हैं।
Okay, so the one of the best examples that I heard recently about causality and correlation. So you can choose whether it's causality or correlation. But very interestingly, do you know that the 9/11 attacks caused the cancellation of Ellen DeGeneres?
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Caused or correlated?
No, so that is the judgment that you will have to put across. But this is a very popular, so to speak, butterfly effect theories, etc., etc. Multiple words that come. It's also a chain connection. So Ellen DeGeneres got cancelled because of an interview that happened with what's that girl's name? Dakota Johnson.
Okay.
Yeah, Dakota Johnson.
Dakota
Okay.
Johnson, right? That was an episode which kind of caused a lot of controversy in terms of how she treats her people,
Yes.
how she felt at the show, and that kind of cascaded into her being cancelled. Dakota Johnson became popular because of 50 Shades of Grey,
Okay.
right? 50 Shades of Grey was inspired by Twilight. So 50 Shades of Grey, E.L.
Okay.
James very openly says was inspired. It's an adult version of Twilight.
Yes.
And Twilight writer, what's that person's name? I've forgotten.
Stephanie
Uh,
Meyer. Stephanie Meyer.
Stephanie Meyer very openly has been known to be inspired by the music of My Chemical Romance.
The
And the
band.
Yeah.
band My Chemical Romance, and the band My Chemical Romance, its origins lie in the 9/11 attack, in the sense that Gerard Way, the lead of My Chemical Romance, when 9/11 happened, that's the time when this person kind of had that epiphany in the mind to say there is no so to speak life, there's no guarantee to life, so what am I doing? Whatever I'm doing, I'll stop all of that and I'll start making music, and that's how My Chemical Romance came. So 9/11 inspired Gerard Way to make MCR. MCR inspired Stephanie Meyer to
Like
My
uh,
God.
Twilight.
write
It came.
Twilight, and Twilight led to 50 Shades of Grey, that led to popularity of Dakota Johnson,
My God.
that led to her being.
This is such a tenuous link. So it has to be weak correlation, not even causation. It is weak.
It is not. It's fun though.
It's fun. It is total fun, and I think that thank you for this. I am going to
Yeah.
revisit some Kevin Bacon things like 7 steps to
Oh yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So, yeah. So I
Six
think maybe
degrees
we
of separation, not seven. 6 degrees of separation.
6 degrees
6
of
degrees.
separation.
Have you
Yeah,
watched
6
the movie? Have you
Yeah.
watched the movie 6 degrees of separation?
No, but you
Will
to some.
Smith, Donald Sutherland, quite nice.
I will
Okay,
Worth a
check.
watch.
guys. More on this in the next episode.
Yes.
Yeah,
More.
yeah,
I'm
okay.
Thank you. All right.
gonna-
Cheers. Bye.
Take care. Bye bye. Bye.
Bye.
I've just ended.